Title, Can We? My best friend's sister whispered. His answer changed everything. URL, https://www.youtube.com/watch?v =MZ6FW4EKDNI https://www.youtube.com/watch?v =MZ6FW4EKDNI. Andre Mitchell's calloused, dark brown hand trembled as Claire Morgan looked up at him with eyes that held more pain than desire, more desperation than want. "Am I still worth choosing?" she whispered, her voice cracking in the summer darkness. The question hung between them like a loaded gun. One wrong move, one moment of weakness, and he'd destroy the only family his daughter had ever known, betray his best friend, and prove he was exactly the kind of man he'd sworn never to become. But saying no meant watching someone he'd quietly cared about for years believe she was broken beyond repair. Before we dive into the story of impossible choices and unexpected redemption, I want to invite you on this journey with me. Stay until the end to see how one honest conversation changed two broken lives forever. And please hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel and connecting with all of you. The July heat still clung to the Ohio evening, even as the sun dropped below the tree line, painting the sky in shades of burnt orange and deep purple. Andre Mitchell wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his arm, careful not to get wood stain on his face. The deck beneath his feet was nearly finished, just a few more boards to seal, maybe another hour of work. Somewhere in the distance, fireworks popped and crackled, the sound of Independence Day celebrations echoing across the suburban neighborhood. He should have been home by now. His daughter Imani was spending the night at his mother's house, giving him a rare evening to himself. But instead of relaxing, instead of grabbing a beer and watching the fireworks like a normal person, he was here in Mike Morgan's backyard, finishing a repair job that could have waited until tomorrow. That was Andre's life in a nutshell. All work, no play, constantly moving because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering everything he'd lost. "You're still here?" The voice came from behind him, soft and surprised. Andre straightened up, his lower back protesting the movement after hours bent over the deck boards. He turned to find Claire Morgan standing in the doorway of the house, backlit by the warm glow of the kitchen lights. "Yeah, I wanted to finish up," Andre said, setting down his brush. "Your brother's been after me for weeks to get this done. Figured I'd knock it out while I had the time." Claire stepped out onto the newly finished section of the deck, her bare feet quiet against the smooth wood. She was wearing cut-off denim shorts and an oversized t-shirt that hung off one shoulder, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. At 28, she was 4 years younger than Andre, but tonight she looked even younger, vulnerable in a way that made something protective twist in his chest. "Mike's not even here," she said, wrapping her arms around herself despite the heat. "He and Sarah took the kids to the fireworks display downtown. Won't be back for hours." I know." Andre picked up his brush again, not quite meeting her eyes. "Told him I'd let myself out when I was done." The truth was, he'd known the house would be empty. Mike had mentioned his plans days ago, and Andre had deliberately chosen tonight to work. Being alone in his own house had become unbearable lately. Too quiet. Too many memories lurking in the corners. At least here, surrounded by someone else's life and someone else's family, he could pretend his own wasn't falling apart. Claire moved closer, leaning against the deck railing. She watched him work in silence for a few minutes, the distant boom of fireworks punctuating the quiet. Andre tried to focus on the wood grain beneath his brush, on the smooth, practiced motions that came from 15 years of skilled labor, but he was acutely aware of her presence, of the way she seemed to be gathering courage for something. "Can I ask you something?" she finally said. "Sure." Andre kept his eyes on his work. "Why did your wife leave?" The brush stuttered in his hand, leaving a slight smear in the otherwise perfect finish. Andre set it down carefully, buying himself a moment before answering. It was a personal question, maybe too personal, but Claire had always been direct. It was one of the things he'd quietly admired about her over the years. Ex-wife, he corrected gently, and it's complicated. That's what everyone says when they don't want to tell the truth. Andre looked at her, then really looked at her. In the fading light, he could see the shadows under her eyes, the tightness around her mouth that spoke of sleepless nights and hard questions. Mike had mentioned that Claire had moved back home a few months ago after a bad breakup, but Andre hadn't pushed for details. He figured everyone deserved to keep their pain private if they wanted to, but now, seeing the way she was looking at him, like his answer mattered more than casual curiosity would explain, he decided to give her the truth. She said I was too safe, he said quietly. Too predictable. Said she felt like she was drowning in responsibility and routine, and I was the anchor keeping her underwater. He picked up a clean rag, wiping his hands methodically. Found out she'd been having an affair with a guy from her gym. Someone exciting. Someone who made her feel alive. Claire flinched. I'm sorry. Don't be. Happened almost 3 years ago. I'm over it. The lie came easily, worn smooth from repetition. He wasn't over it, not really. But he'd learned to live with it the way you learn to live with an old injury that ached when the weather changed. Are you? Claire asked softly. Over it? Andre met her eyes. In them, he saw the same question reflected back at him, the one she was really asking herself. Are we ever really over the people who break us? Some days more than others, he admitted, but I've got Imani. That makes it easier. Having someone who needs you, who depends on you. It gives you a reason to get up every morning, you know. Claire nodded, but something in her expression crumbled. She turned away quickly, but not before Andre caught the shine of tears in her eyes. So, hey, he said, setting down the rag and taking a step toward her. Claire, what's wrong? She shook her head, her shoulders trembling. Nothing, I'm fine. Yeah. You're crying on your brother's deck on the 4th of July while everyone else is watching fireworks. That's not fine. A sound escaped her that was half laugh, half sob. When did you become so observant? I've always been observant, especially when it comes to... He stopped himself, the words catching in his throat. Especially when it comes to you. He couldn't say that, shouldn't say that. She was Mike's little sister, off limits by every code of friendship that mattered. Comes to what? She asked, turning back to face him. Andre ran a hand through his short coils, suddenly aware of how close they were standing, how intimate this moment felt, despite the open air and the distant sound of celebrations. Comes to people who are hurting, he finished carefully. Claire studied his face for a long moment as if trying to decide whether to believe him, whether to trust him with whatever was eating her alive inside. Finally she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Do you think there's something wrong with me? The question hit him like a physical blow. What? No, Claire, why would you? Because he said there was. The words came out in a rush now, like a dam breaking. Jason, my ex, he said I was broken, that I didn't know how to be intimate, how to really let someone in. That being with me was like being with a robot going through the motions. Andre's hands clenched into fists at his sides. He said that to you? He said a lot of things. Claire wrapped her arms tighter around herself as if trying to physically hold herself together. But that's the one that stuck because maybe he was right. Maybe there is something fundamentally broken in me. Maybe that's why I can't, why I don't... She broke off, shaking her head. Claire! Andre's voice was firm now, cutting through her spiral. Listen to me. There is nothing broken about you. Nothing. You don't know that. Yes, I do. He took another step closer, close enough now that he could smell her shampoo, something floral and clean. I've known you since you were 20 years old. I've watched you grow up, watched you navigate life with more grace and strength than most people twice your age. And I've seen the way you love, the way you care for your family, your friends. There's nothing broken about that. Tears were streaming down her face now, and she didn't bother to wipe them away. Then why can't I feel it? Why does intimacy feel like checking boxes on a list instead of something I actually want? The honesty in her words, the raw vulnerability made Andre's chest ache. He understood more than she knew. Those first few months after his wife left, he'd felt the same way. Disconnected from his own body, going through the motions of living without really feeling alive. Because he broke your trust, Andre said quietly. And when someone does that, when they make you feel like your body and your heart are separate things, like one exists to serve someone else's needs and the other doesn't matter, it takes time to put those pieces back together. Claire looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. How long did it take you? I'll let you know when I get there. The admission hung between them, honest and raw. They stood there in the gathering darkness, two broken people recognizing each other's pain, and for a moment the world felt very small and very quiet. Then Claire did something that changed everything. She reached up and placed her hand against his chest, right over his heart. Andre felt his breath catch, felt his pulse kick up under her palm. Her hand was small and warm, and the touch was gentle, exploratory, not demanding. He said, his voice rough. What are you doing? I need to know, she whispered. I need to know if it's me or if it was him. If I'm really broken or if I don't. Don't! The word came out sharper than he intended, but he didn't move away. He couldn't. Every instinct screamed at him to step back, to put distance between them, but his feet might as well have been nailed to the deck. Please. Her other hand came up to his chest now, both palms flat against him, and he could feel her trembling. I'm not asking for forever. I'm not asking for love. I just need to know if I can still feel something. Anything with someone who... Someone who what? Andre's hands came up to cover hers, but he didn't push her away. Not yet. Someone who cares about you. Someone who sees you as more than a body. Claire, that's not how this works. Then how does it work? There was desperation in her voice now, a rawness that broke his heart. Because I don't know anymore. I don't know if I'm dead inside, or if he killed something in me, or if I'm just too damaged to... Stop! Andre's voice was firm but gentle. He wrapped his fingers around her wrists, holding her hands against his chest but stopping their movement. You need to stop saying those things about yourself. Why? She looked up at him, and the pain in her eyes was almost unbearable to witness. It's true, isn't it? I'm 28 years old and I don't even know what it's supposed to feel like to want someone, to really want them, not just go along with what they want. Andre's throat felt tight. He knew he should let go of her hands, should step away, should end this before it went any further. But looking at her face, seeing the desperation and self-doubt written in every line, he couldn't bring himself to reject her. Not when she was already so close to believing she was worthless. It's supposed to feel safe, he said quietly. It's supposed to feel like a choice you're making because you want to, not because someone expects it or because you're trying to prove something. And it's supposed to happen with someone who makes you feel valued for everything you are, not just what your body can do. Like you? The question was barely audible. Andre's heart hammered against his ribs. Claire, don't. Why not? She pressed closer and he could feel the warmth of her body through the thin fabric of her shirt. You just described yourself. You make me feel safe. You make me feel valued. And you're the first person in months who's looked at me like I'm more than broken pieces. I'm your brother's best friend. He forced the words out. I know I'm 4 years older than you. I know I have a daughter, responsibilities, a life that's already complicated enough without... I know all of that. Claire's voice was stronger now, more certain. But I also know that standing here with you, I feel more alive than I've felt in years. And maybe that means something. Maybe that's worth... It's not. Andre forced himself to release her hands, to take a step back, even though it felt like tearing away part of himself. Claire, listen to me. You're vulnerable right now. You're hurting and confused and looking for something to make you feel whole again. But I can't be that for you. I won't be. Her face crumpled. Because you don't want me. Because I respect you too much to take advantage of you when you're like this. He reached out, gently cupping her face in his hands, making her look at him. If we did this, if I said yes to what you're asking, you'd regret it tomorrow. You'd wake up and realize you gave yourself to someone out of desperation, not desire. And that would hurt you even more than what he did. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Because I've been where you are. After my wife left, I did some things I'm not proud of. I tried to fill the emptiness with bodies and temporary connections. And you know what? It made everything worse. It made me feel more broken, more alone, more convinced that I was exactly as worthless as she made me feel. Tears spilled over Claire's cheeks, running over his thumbs. So, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to know if I'm broken or not? If I can't even. You start by believing you're not broken. Andre's voice was gentle but firm. You start by understanding that what he did to you, making you feel like your worth was tied to your performance, like intimacy was something you owed instead of something you shared. That was about his brokenness, not yours. But how do I fix it? How do I learn to want again? You give yourself time. You learn to trust yourself again before you try to trust someone else. And when you're ready, really ready, not just desperate to prove something, you find someone who wants to know your heart before they touch your body. Claire closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. That sounds impossible. It's not. It's just hard. Andre stroked his thumbs across her cheekbones, wiping away tears. But you're strong enough to do hard things. I've seen you do them. They stood like that for a long moment, Andre cradling her face while she cried silently, the fireworks painting the sky above them in bursts of red and gold. When she finally opened her eyes, there was something different in her expression. Still sad, still hurting, but maybe a little less hopeless. What if I can't do it alone? She whispered. You don't have to. Andre let his hands drop slowly, giving her space to breathe. You've got your family, your brother, and you've got me if you want. Not what you were asking for, but as a friend. As someone who understands what it's like to rebuild yourself from broken pieces. Claire nodded slowly, wrapping her arms around herself again. I should go inside. Yeah. She turned toward the house, then paused, looking back at him over her shoulder. Andre. Yeah. Thank you for saying no. For seeing me as more than... Her voice broke and she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Always, Andre said quietly. Claire disappeared into the house, leaving him alone on the deck with his racing heart and his tangled thoughts. Andre stood there for a long time, listening to the distant fireworks, feeling the weight of what had almost happened pressing down on his chest. He'd done the right thing. He knew he'd done the right thing. But God, it had been hard. Hard to step away from someone he'd quietly cared about for years. Hard to reject someone who was offering herself so openly, even if her reasons were all wrong. Hard to be the kind of man he wanted to be, instead of the kind of man who took what was offered without asking questions. Andre packed up his tools slowly, methodically, using the familiar motions to calm his racing pulse. The deck was finished, beautiful even, smooth and level, ready to host family barbecues and lazy summer evenings for years to come. But all he could think about was the look in Claire's eyes when she'd asked if she was broken, the way her hands had trembled against his chest, the desperate hope in her voice when she'd asked if he wanted her. He did want her. That was the hell of it. He'd wanted her for years, quietly, carefully, keeping that want locked away where it couldn't hurt anyone or complicate anything. Mike was his best friend, his brother in everything but blood. And Claire had always been off limits. Too young, too much Mike's little sister, too tangled up in a family that Andre needed more than he needed any romantic connection. But tonight she'd offered him something he hadn't let himself have in 3 years. Genuine connection. The possibility of intimacy with someone who knew him, who saw past his defenses, and he turned her down because it was the right thing to do, because she deserved better than to be someone's rebound or someone's proof of worth. The decision left him feeling hollowed out and achingly alone. Andre locked up the workshop and walked around to the front of the house, fishing his truck keys out of his pocket. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother, a photo of Imani covered in chocolate ice cream, grinning at the camera. He smiled, despite everything, sending back a quick reply before climbing into his truck. The drive home took him through the center of town, where crowds still gathered to watch the fireworks display. Families sat on blankets in the park, children perched on their father's shoulders, couples wrapped in each other's arms. Andre drove past it all, headed toward his quiet house and his empty bed, wondering if he just made the biggest mistake of his life, or narrowly avoided making one. He was still wondering when his phone rang 20 minutes later, Mike's name flashing on the screen. Andre's stomach dropped. Had Claire told him? Had she broken down and confessed what had happened on the deck? Hey, man, he answered, trying to keep his voice casual. Hey, just wanted to let you know the deck looks amazing. Seriously, you outdid yourself. Mike sounded happy, relaxed. Sarah keeps going on about how perfect it is. You free for dinner next week? Want to have you and Imani over to properly celebrate? Relief flooded through Andre so intensely he had to pull over. Yeah, sounds good. Everything okay? You sound weird. Just tired, long day. Well, get some rest, and seriously, thanks for finishing this up. I know I've been nagging you about it for weeks. Mike laughed, the easy sound of a man who had no idea how close his best friend had come to crossing an unforgivable line. I owe you one. No, you don't. That's what friends do. They said their goodbyes and hung up. Andre sat in his truck on the side of the road, hands gripping the steering wheel, breathing hard. Friends, that's what they were. That's what he and Mike would always be. And that meant Claire was off limits. No matter how much he wanted to go back to that deck and give her a different answer, it meant he'd done the right thing. It meant he'd keep doing the right thing, even if it killed him. Andre pulled back onto the road and drove home, the taste of a decision in his mouth, bitter and necessary and right. Above him, the fireworks finale lit up the sky in cascading streams of light, beautiful and temporary, burning bright before fading into darkness. Just like the moment on the deck, just like the possibility of something that could never be, he told himself it was for the best. As he pulled into his empty driveway, he told himself Claire would thank him someday when she'd healed enough to understand that what she'd been asking for would have hurt her more than helped her. He told himself that being alone was better than being with someone for all the wrong reasons. He told himself a lot of things that night. None of them made it easier to sleep. The diner on Maple Street had been serving the same breakfast menu for 30 years, and Andre had been eating there since Imani was that age. The red vinyl booths were cracked and patched with duct tape. The coffee was always too strong, and the waitress Linda, who'd worked there longer than Andre had been alive, knew everyone's order by heart. It was 6 o'clock in the morning when Andre slid into his usual booth by the window, exhausted from a sleepless night spent replaying every moment on that deck. He tossed and turned until 3, finally giving up and going for a run that left his legs aching and his mind no clearer. Now he sat nursing his second cup of coffee, watching the sun paint the empty street in shades of gold. He didn't expect to see Claire walk through the door. She spotted him immediately, and for a moment they just looked at each other across the half-empty diner. Her hair was pulled back in the same messy ponytail from last night, and she was wearing yoga pants and an old college sweatshirt. She looked like she'd slept about as well as he had. Linda glanced between them with the knowing eye of someone who'd witnessed 1,000 human dramas play out in these booths. You want your usual spot, honey, or you joining the gentleman? Claire's eyes never left Andre's face. Joining him, if that's okay. Andre nodded, and Claire slid into the booth across from him. Linda brought her a coffee without asking, then disappeared to give them privacy. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid. I couldn't sleep, Claire finally said, wrapping both hands around her coffee mug like she needed the warmth, despite the July heat already building outside. Me neither. I kept thinking about what you said about learning to trust myself again before I try to trust someone else. She took a sip of coffee, made a face at the bitterness. The thing is, I don't know how to do that. I don't even know where to start. Andre studied her face, seeing the dark circles under her eyes, the vulnerability in the set of her shoulders. Part of him wanted to tell her this wasn't his problem, that she needed to figure this out on her own, or with a therapist, or with literally anyone except him. But a bigger part of him couldn't turn away from her pain, not when he understood it so intimately. You start by being honest, he said quietly, about what you want versus what you think you're supposed to want, about what actually makes you feel good versus what you've been conditioned to accept. That sounds like therapy speak. Because I've been to therapy. Andre's mouth quirked in a humorless smile. A lot of it. After the divorce, my therapist said I had a tendency to define myself by other people's needs instead of my own. Sound familiar? Claire's eyes widened slightly. Yeah, actually, Jason used to say I was too accommodating. He said it like it was a compliment at first and then later like it was my biggest flaw. That's because he was using you. Andre's voice hardened. And when you finally started pulling back, when you stopped being so accommodating, he blamed you for it. instead of taking responsibility for the fact that he trained you to ignore your own needs. How do you know that's what happened? Because that's what happens in relationships where one person has all the power and the other person is just trying to keep the peace. Andre leaned forward, his forearms resting on the table. Tell me something. When was the last time you did something just because you wanted to, not because someone else wanted you to? Claire opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. She sat there for a long moment, her brow furrowed in thought. I don't know, she finally admitted. That's pathetic, isn't it? It's not pathetic. It's what trauma does. It makes you forget you're allowed to have preferences. Is that what happened to you with your ex-wife? Andre nodded slowly. I spent 7 years trying to be enough for her. Exciting enough, interesting enough, successful enough. I worked overtime to pay for the lifestyle she wanted. I agreed to put off having more kids even though I wanted a bigger family. I pretended I was fine with her girls' nights out that turned into weekends away. And you know what? None of it mattered. She still left because she wanted someone exciting, because she wanted someone who wasn't me. Andre traced his finger around the rim of his coffee cup. And the hell of it is, I wasn't even me anymore by the end. I'd turned myself into this version of a husband I thought she needed, and I lost track of who I actually was in the process. Claire reached across the table and placed her hand over his. The gesture was simple, comforting rather than seductive, and Andre felt something in his chest loosen slightly. So how did you find yourself again, she asked. I'm still working on it. He turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. The contact felt natural, easy. But I started by making a list of things I actually liked. Not things I thought I should like or things other people liked, just me. What was on the list? Working with my hands, building things, those early morning runs where the world is quiet, reading to Imani before bed, baseball games where I can just sit and watch without having to talk. He smiled slightly. Really good bourbon. Simple stuff mostly. Turns out I'm a pretty simple guy when you strip away all the performance. That doesn't sound simple, Claire said. That sounds like someone who knows exactly what brings him peace. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just boring and my ex-wife was right to leave. You're not boring. Claire's voice was fierce, sudden. You're steady. There's a difference. Andre looked at their joined hands, feeling the warmth of her skin against his. He knew he should pull away, should maintain some kind of distance. But sitting here in this diner at dawn, exhausted and honest and raw, he couldn't bring himself to let go. Can I ask you something? Claire said. Yeah. Last night when I asked you to... She stumbled over the words, color rising in her cheeks. Why did you really say no? And don't give me the noble answer about respecting me. I want the real reason. Andre's jaw tightened. That was the real reason. That was part of it, she pressed, squeezing his hand. But there's more, isn't there? I could see it in your eyes. You wanted to say yes. He couldn't deny it. Not when she was looking at him like that, seeing through every defense he'd carefully constructed. Yeah, he admitted roughly. I wanted to say yes. Then why didn't you? Because I have a daughter who's watching how I treat women. Because I have a best friend who trusts me to be around his sister without taking advantage. Because I've spent 3 years trying to rebuild my life into something I can be proud of. He paused, then added more quietly, and I'm not going to throw that away for one night of feeling less alone. And because you deserve someone who wants all of you, not just the parts you were offering. Claire's eyes shimmered with tears. What if that's all I have right now? What if the rest of me is too broken to offer anyone? Then you take time to heal before you offer anything. Andre pulled his hand back gently, needing the distance to think clearly. Claire, listen to me. What you were asking for last night, that wasn't about wanting me. That was about wanting proof that you're still desirable, still worth choosing. And I get that. God, I get that more than you know. But using another person to validate your worth never works. It just leaves you feeling emptier than before. So what am I supposed to do? Claire's voice cracked. Just sit around healing indefinitely while everyone else moves on with their lives? No. You're supposed to learn who you are outside of who someone else wanted you to be. You're supposed to figure out what you like, what you want, what makes you feel alive that has nothing to do with another person's approval. Andre leaned back in the booth, choosing his words carefully. When was the last time you did something creative, something just for you? Claire frowned. I don't know. I used to paint back in college, but Jason said it was a waste of time, that I should focus on my career instead. Did you like painting? I loved it. Her voice softened with memory. I loved the way time would just disappear when I was working on something, the way I could take what was in my head and make it real on canvas. When was the last time you picked up a brush? 5 years ago, maybe 6. Claire looked down at her coffee, shame coloring her features. God, I can't believe I let him take that from me. He didn't take it. You can pick it up again anytime you want. Andre waited until she looked up at him. That's what I mean about learning to trust yourself. You start by doing the things that made you feel like you before anyone else had an opinion about who you should be. Just like that. Just start painting again. Why not? You think it's going to be harder than what you're doing now, sitting around trying to figure out if you're broken. Andre's voice was gentle but firm. At least painting gives you something to show for the effort. Claire laughed, a real laugh that lit up her whole face. You make it sound so easy. It's not easy, but it's simple. There's a difference. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the diner slowly filling up with the breakfast crowd. Linda came by to refill their coffee and take their order. Eggs and toast for Andre, pancakes for Claire. When she left, Claire spoke again, her voice quieter now. Can I tell you something? Anything. Last night wasn't the first time I thought about you that way. She said it quickly, like ripping off a bandage. I know I shouldn't say that. I know it makes everything more complicated. But I'm trying to be honest, and the truth is I've been thinking about you since I moved back home. Andre's heart kicked hard against his ribs. Claire, let me finish. She held up a hand. I'm not asking for anything. I'm not trying to make this into something it can't be. I just need you to know that last night wasn't just about desperation or trying to prove I'm not broken. Part of it was real. The wanting you part was real. Andre didn't know what to say. Every word that came to mind felt inadequate or dangerous or both. He'd spent years carefully not thinking about Claire as anything other than Mike's little sister. And now she was sitting across from him at dawn, confessing feelings he couldn't reciprocate without destroying everything that mattered to him. I care about you, he finally said. You know I do, but Claire, we can't. I know. Mike, Imani, your whole life that you've worked so hard to rebuild. She smiled sadly. I'm not asking you to risk any of that. I just needed you to know it wasn't all in my head, that there's something here, even if we can never do anything about it. Their food arrived, and they ate in silence for a while. Andre's mind raced, trying to process everything she'd said, everything he was feeling. The rational part of his brain screamed at him to end this conversation, to put distance between them before things got any more complicated. But another part of him, the part that had been alone for 3 years, the part that recognized something genuine in Claire's eyes, wanted to stay right here in this booth and keep talking until they figured out what this thing between them actually was. I have a rule, Andre said finally, setting down his fork. After the divorce, I made a rule. No relationships, no dating, nothing that could distract me from being the father Imani needs or complicate my friendship with Mike. That sounds lonely. It is lonely, Andre admitted, but it's also safe. And right now, safe is what I need. Claire nodded slowly. I understand. I'm not trying to mess up your life, Andre. I needed to be honest, because if I'm going to learn to trust myself again, I have to start by telling the truth about what I feel instead of hiding it to make everyone else comfortable. That's fair. Andre met her eyes. And I appreciate the honesty, but you need to understand something. I meant what I said last night. I'm not going to be the person you use to prove you're not broken. If something were ever to happen between us, and I'm not saying it will, it would have to be because we both wanted it for the right reasons, not because you're trying to heal from your ex or because I'm tired of being alone. What would the right reasons be? I don't know yet, but I know they start with both of us being whole enough to choose each other instead of just choosing not to be alone. Claire pushed her pancakes around her plate, absorbing his words. So, what do we do now? We finish breakfast, we go home, and we take some time to figure out who we are outside of our broken places. Andre paused, then added, and if you really want to do this work of healing and finding yourself again, I'll help you as a friend. No expectations, no hidden agenda. Just someone who understands what it's like to rebuild from nothing. Why would you do that? Because I've been where you are, Andre said, and because someone helped me when I was there. And maybe it's time I paid that forward. He didn't add the other reason, that he cared about her more than he should, that seeing her in pain made his chest ache, that some part of him wanted to be close to her, even if it could never be in the way they both clearly wanted. Claire smiled genuinely this time. Okay, friends. I can do friends. Good. Andre pulled out his wallet to pay the check. Then, as your friend, I'm telling you to go buy some art supplies today. Get a canvas. Get paint. Spend this afternoon doing something that makes you feel like yourself. And what are you going to do? Pick up Imani from my mom's house. Take her to the park. Maybe work on that bookshelf I've been meaning to build for her room. He smiled slightly. Simple stuff. The kind of stuff that reminds me why I'm doing all this. They left the diner together, stepping out into the morning heat. The street was coming alive now. Shops opening, people heading to work, the normal rhythm of a summer Thursday. Claire paused beside her car, keys in hand. Andre, thank you for saying no last night, for being honest this morning, for seeing me as more than just broken pieces. Her voice caught. I needed that more than you know. What? You're not broken pieces, Claire. You're a whole person who's been treated badly. There's a difference. She nodded, blinking back tears. Then, before he could react, she stepped forward and hugged him. It was quick, friendly, nothing inappropriate, but Andre felt it in every nerve, the warmth of her body against his, the way she fit perfectly under his chin, the subtle scent of her shampoo. He let himself hold her for exactly 3 seconds, then stepped back gently. Go paint, he said. Go build a bookshelf, she replied. They got into their separate cars and drove in opposite directions. Andre watched her taillights disappear in his rearview mirror, feeling something shift in his chest. He'd done the right thing again. He'd set boundaries, been honest, protected both of them from making a mistake they'd regret. So why did it feel like he'd just let something important slip away? The rest of the day passed in a blur of normal activities. He picked up Imani, who chattered nonstop about the fireworks and the sparklers and the ice cream. He took her to the park and pushed her on the swings until his arms ached. He stopped at the hardware store for supplies, then spent the afternoon in his garage building the bookshelf he'd promised months ago. Imani helped, handing him screws and asking endless questions about how wood fit together and why measurements mattered. Andre answered patiently, grateful for the distraction of her 7-year-old logic. This was what mattered. This right here. His daughter's laughter, her small hands helping with the sanding, her proud grin when the bookshelf started taking shape. This was enough. It had to be enough. But that night, after Imani was asleep and the house was quiet again, Andre found himself on his back deck with a beer he didn't really want, staring up at the stars and thinking about Claire. About the way she'd looked in the diner at dawn, raw and honest and brave. About the confession she'd made, the feelings she'd admitted to, the possibilities she'd laid out between them like a fragile thing that could shatter with one wrong move. He wanted her, God. He wanted her, not just physically, though that was there too, but he wanted to know her, to help her heal, to be the person she turned to when the world felt too heavy. He wanted to watch her paint, to hear her laugh, to build something real and lasting instead of just surviving alone in his carefully controlled life. But wanting wasn't enough. Wanting had never been enough. His ex-wife had wanted someone exciting, and look where that got them. Claire had wanted proof she wasn't broken, and giving her that proof through his body would only break her more. What they needed was time, space, a chance to become the people they actually were instead of the people their pain had shaped them into. Andre finished his beer and went inside, locking up for the night. Tomorrow he'd go back to work, back to the routine that kept him steady, and Claire would paint, hopefully, and start finding herself again. And maybe someday, when they were both whole enough to choose each other for the right reasons, they could revisit this thing between them and see if it was real or just two lonely people finding comfort in each other's brokenness. But not today, not yet. 3 days later, Mike called him about dinner plans. Andre agreed, carefully keeping his voice normal as Mike rattled off details about the meal Sarah was planning and how excited the kids were to show Imani their new puppy. Mike mentioned almost as an afterthought that Claire had been painting again. "Haven't seen her this focused in years," Mike said. "She's got canvases all over her room. Won't show anyone what she's working on, but she seems happier, more like herself." Andre smiled despite himself. "That's good, really good." "Yeah, man, I don't know what happened, but it's like she's coming back to life or something." Sarah thinks maybe the breakup was the best thing that could have happened to her. Maybe it was. Anyway, Saturday at 6 o'clock. Don't be late or Sarah will serve Imani a cake before dinner just to spite you. Andre laughed. Wouldn't dream of it. He hung up feeling lighter than he had in days. Claire was painting. She was finding herself again, and he'd helped make that happen. Not by giving her what she thought she wanted, but by showing her what she actually needed. It was enough. It had to be enough. Saturday arrived with clear skies and the kind of heat that made the air shimmer above the pavement. Andre and Imani showed up at Mike's house right on time, Imani clutching a bouquet of wildflowers she'd insisted on picking for Sarah. The new deck looked perfect in the evening light, already set up with a table and chairs for dinner. Claire answered the door. She was wearing a sundress covered in paint stains, her hair piled on top of her head in a messy bun, and there was a smudge of blue paint on her cheek. She looked radiant. Hey, she said, smiling at both of them. "Imani, those flowers are beautiful." "I picked them myself," Imani announced proudly. "Well, they're perfect. Come on in. Everyone's out back." Andre followed her through the house, very aware of her presence in front of him, of the way the evening light caught her hair. When they reached the kitchen, Claire paused, turning to face him, while Imani ran ahead to find the puppy. "I took your advice," Claire said quietly. "I can see that," Andre said. "You look good, happy." "I feel good. For the first time in months, I actually feel like myself." She touched the paint on her cheek self-consciously. "I've been painting for 12 hours a day. I can't stop. It's like everything I've been holding in for years is just pouring out onto the canvas." "That's exactly what you needed." "Yeah." She held his gaze. "Thank you for the push, for understanding what I needed better than I did." "Anytime." Mike's voice boomed from the backyard, calling them to dinner. Claire smiled and headed toward the door, but Andre caught her hand gently. "Claire!" She turned back. "Keep painting. Keep finding yourself. Don't stop just because someone else has an opinion about it." "I won't," she squeezed his hand. "I promise." They joined the others on the deck, and dinner was loud and chaotic and perfect. Imani played with Mike's kids and the new puppy while the adults talked and laughed and enjoyed the summer evening. Andre caught Claire watching him several times, a soft expression on her face that made his heart ache. But they kept their distance. They were careful. And if anyone noticed the new awareness between them, the way their eyes met across the table and held for just a moment too long, nobody said anything. After dinner, while Mike was manning the grill for dessert s'mores, and Sarah was helping the kids roast marshmallows, Claire pulled Andre aside. "Want to see what I've been working on?" He shouldn't. He knew he shouldn't, but he nodded anyway. Claire's room was on the second floor, tucked at the end of the hallway in what used to be Mike's old bedroom before he moved out. Andre had been up here countless times over the years, helping Mike move furniture, fixing a broken window, installing new shelves, but walking up those stairs with Claire now felt different, charged with an awareness that made every step feel deliberate. She opened the door and stepped aside to let him in. The room had been transformed into a makeshift studio. Canvases leaned against every wall, some blank, others half-finished, a few completed and glowing with color. The air smelled like oil paint and turpentine, and afternoon light streamed through the window, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air. "It's a mess," Claire said apologetically. "I know I should be more organized, but when I'm working, I just..." "It's perfect," Andre interrupted, his eyes moving from canvas to canvas. "Claire, these are incredible." He wasn't just being kind. The paintings were raw and emotional, full of movement and color that seemed to pulse with life. Some were abstract, violent slashes of red and black that spoke of pain and anger. Others were more representational, a woman's hands reaching toward light, a figure emerging from shadow, a landscape that shifted from darkness to dawn. Claire moved to stand beside him, looking at her own work with critical eyes. They're not finished. Most of them aren't even close, but it feels good to be making something again. To have something to pour everything into that isn't... She stopped herself. That isn't another person, Andre finished quietly. Yeah. She wrapped her arms around herself, a gesture he was starting to recognize as her way of holding herself together. You were right about that. I was trying to use you to fill a hole that I needed to fill myself. Andre studied a canvas near the window, a figure painted in shades of blue and gray, curled in on itself, but with one hand reaching outward. The loneliness in it was palpable, but so was the hope. Is this how you see yourself? That's how I saw myself 3 days ago. Claire moved to another canvas. This one brighter, warmer, a figure in motion, dancing or running, painted in golds and oranges. This is how I'm trying to see myself now. What changed? You did. She turned to face him, and the vulnerability in her expression made his breath catch. Not in the way you're thinking. Not because I'm putting that expectation on you, but because you showed me I could choose differently, that I didn't have to accept someone else's version of who I was. Andre wanted to touch her, to close the distance between them and tell her she was more than just trying to see herself differently. She was everything beautiful and strong that she was painting. But he kept his hands at his sides, kept the careful distance they both needed. Jason called yesterday, Claire said, her voice hardening slightly. He wanted to apologize, said he'd been thinking about our relationship, about how he treated me, and he realized he made mistakes. What did you say? I told him he didn't make mistakes. He made choices. Every time he criticized me, every time he made me feel small or broken or not enough, those were choices. Claire's hands clenched into fists. And then I told him I was done accepting his version of reality, that I knew my worth and it had nothing to do with whether he could see it. Pride swelled in Andre's chest. Good for you. I couldn't have done it a week ago. A week ago I would have taken him back, convinced myself that his apology meant something had changed. She laughed bitterly. But painting again, remembering who I was before him, it gave me clarity. I don't want to go back to being that person who twisted herself into shapes to make someone else comfortable. You shouldn't have to. So, no, I shouldn't. Claire picked up a brush, turned it over in her hands. But here's the thing I'm realizing. I can't just not be that person anymore. I have to actively choose to be someone different every day. Every time someone expects me to shrink or accommodate or disappear myself to make room for them, Andre moved closer, drawn by the passion in her voice. That's exactly right. Healing isn't passive. It's a choice you make over and over. Is that what you do? With your ex-wife? With the memories? With all of it? Every single day. Andre ran a hand through his hair, choosing his words carefully. Some days are easier than others. Some days I wake up and the first thought in my head is still her voice telling me I'm not enough. But then I get up anyway. I make Imani breakfast, I go to work, I build something with my hands. And by the end of the day, I've proven that voice wrong just by living my life. Claire set down the brush and turned to face him fully. They were standing close now, close enough that Andre could see the flecks of paint in her hair, the determination in her eyes. Close enough that it would take almost nothing to reach out and touch her face, to pull her close, to finally give into everything he'd been holding back. Can I ask you something? She said softly. Yeah. That night, on the deck, when I asked you to, when I offered, she took a breath. You said you wanted to say yes. Do you still? Andre's heart hammered in his chest. This was dangerous territory, the kind of conversation that could undo all the careful boundaries they'd established. But Claire had been honest with him, raw and vulnerable and real. She deserved the same. Yeah, he admitted. I still want to say yes. But you won't. No, not yet. Maybe not ever. He held her gaze, needing her to understand. Because I meant what I said. I'm not going to be the person you used to prove you're healed. And right now, as much as we both might want something to happen between us, the timing is all wrong. You're still figuring out who you are. I'm still trying to be the father Imani needs, and my friendship with Mike... I know. Claire reached out and placed her hand on his chest right over his heart. the same gesture from that night on the deck. But this time it felt different, less desperate, more certain. I'm not asking you to choose me over any of that. I'm not even asking you to choose me at all. I just needed to know if what I'm feeling is real or if I'm making it up in my head. It's real. Andre covered her hand with his own, pressing her palm more firmly against his heartbeat. What you're feeling is real. What I'm feeling is real. But that doesn't mean acting on it is the right thing to do. What if it never becomes the right thing? Claire whispered. What if the timing is never right and we just miss each other? The question hung between them, heavy with possibility and loss. Andre had asked himself the same thing 100 times since that night on the deck. What if he was being too careful? What if he was protecting them both from something that could actually be beautiful? Then we miss each other, he said finally. And that's sad, and it hurts, but it's still better than rushing into something before we're ready and destroying it before it has a chance to be real. Claire's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. When did you get so wise? I'm not wise, I'm just scared. He let the honesty spill out. I'm scared of screwing this up, scared of hurting you, scared of losing Mike's friendship, scared of Imani getting attached to someone who might not stay. I'm scared of being wrong about us, and I'm scared of being right. I'm scared, Claire. So am I. She stepped closer, and now they were nearly touching, her hand still pressed against his chest, his still covering hers. I'm terrified that I'm reading this all wrong, that I'm projecting what I want to see instead of seeing what's actually there. But I'm also terrified of walking away from something real just because the timing isn't perfect. The timing isn't just not perfect. Andre forced himself to say it. It's actively bad. You're 3 months out of a relationship that damaged you. I'm 3 years into rebuilding a life that barely feels stable. We're both dealing with our own stuff, and adding each other into the mix right now would be like building a house on a foundation that hasn't set yet, Claire finished. Exactly. He was surprised she understood. We'd be so focused on holding each other up that we'd never actually get steady on our own. Claire nodded slowly, processing. Then she did something that surprised him. She stepped back, taking her hand away from his chest, putting deliberate distance between them. Okay, she said. Then we wait. Just like that? Just like that. She smiled, and it was genuine despite the tears still shining in her eyes. Because you're right. I need to get steady on my own first. I need to know who I am when I'm not defining myself by someone else's needs or expectations. And you need whatever you need. Time with Imani, time to keep building your life, time to trust that you're enough exactly as you are. That simple? It's not simple at all, Claire said quietly. It's probably the hardest thing I've ever done. She moved to the window, looking out at the backyard where their families were laughing and making s'mores. But I'm choosing it anyway. I'm choosing to wait, to heal, to become someone who's ready for something real, instead of just desperate for something to fill the emptiness. Andre joined her at the window, standing close but not touching. Below, Imani was showing Mike's youngest daughter how to roast the perfect marshmallow, her face serious with concentration. Sarah and Mike were laughing about something, comfortable in the easy intimacy of a long marriage. It was a picture of normalcy, of family, of everything Andre had been working so hard to protect. I don't know how long it'll take, he said quietly, for me to be ready, for us to be ready, if we ever are. I know, and I'm not asking for promises or timelines. Claire turned to look at him. I'm just asking if you'll still be here, as a friend, as someone who understands. Even if it never becomes more than that, Andre said, I'll be here. The promise came easily because it was true. Whatever this thing between them was or wasn't, whatever it might become or never be, he cared about her. That much was certain. Good. She reached out and squeezed his hand briefly, then let go. We should get back before Mike sends out a search party. They walked downstairs together, and if Sarah noticed that both of them looked a little emotional when they rejoined the group, she didn't mention it. The rest of the evening passed in comfortable chaos, s'mores and laughter, kids running wild in the backyard, the easy rhythm of families who'd known each other for years. Andre caught Claire watching him several times, and each time they shared a small smile, an acknowledgement of the understanding they'd reached. It wasn't what either of them wanted, not really, but it was what they needed. Space to heal, time to grow, a chance to become the people who could actually choose each other for the right reasons instead of just using each other to fill empty spaces. When it was time to leave, Imani was half asleep on Andre's shoulder, sticky with marshmallow and exhausted from playing. Claire walked them to the door while Mike cleaned up in the kitchen. "Thank you for showing me the paintings," Andre said quietly. "Thank you for seeing them, really seeing them." She touched his arm briefly. "And thank you for being honest about all of it." "You too." Imani stirred, mumbling something about puppies and s'mores. Claire smiled and gently brushed a curl back from the little girl's face. The gesture was tender, natural, and it made Andre's chest ache with the possibility of what could be someday if they could both just be patient enough. "Good night, Andre." "Good night, Claire." He carried Imani to the truck and buckled her in, her eyes already closed again. As he drove home through the quiet streets, he thought about Claire's paintings, about the journey from that dark, curled figure to the one dancing in golden light. She was healing, really healing, and he'd helped make that possible by saying no, by setting boundaries, by refusing to let her use him as a shortcut to feeling whole. It was the right thing. He knew it was the right thing. So why did it feel like the hardest thing he'd ever done? The next few weeks fell into a new pattern. Andre and Claire saw each other regularly at family dinners, at barbecues, at the birthday party Sarah threw for Mike. They were friendly, careful, maintaining the boundaries they'd agreed on, but there was an awareness between them now, an acknowledgement of something unspoken that colored every interaction. Claire painted obsessively, and Andre watched her transform. The shadows under her eyes faded. The uncertainty in her posture straightened into confidence. She started posting her work online, and people responded. Not just friends being polite, but strangers who connected with the raw emotion in her paintings. Someone offered to show her work in a local gallery. She said yes. Andre built things: a new bookshelf for Imani, a coffee table for his living room, a bench for his back porch. The physical work grounded him, gave him something to focus on besides the constant awareness of Claire. He took Imani to the park, to the library, to Saturday morning baseball games. He read to her every night before bed and listened to her endless stories about school and friends and the puppy at Uncle Mike's house. His life was full, busy, good, and he was lonely in a way he'd never quite articulated before. One Saturday afternoon in late August, Mike called. "Hey, need a favor?" "What's up?" "Sarah's mom fell and broke her hip. We're driving down to Florida tomorrow to help out. Probably be gone for a week. Could you keep an eye on the house, water the plants, grab the mail, that kind of thing?" "Of course, no problem." "Thanks, man. I owe you." Mike paused. "Oh, and Claire's staying here to watch the house, too. She's got that gallery showing coming up next week and didn't want to leave town. That okay?" Andre's pulse kicked up. A week of checking on the house while Claire was there, a week of seeing her, of being around her without the buffer of Mike and Sarah and the kids. "Yeah," he said. "That's fine." "Great, I'll leave a key under the mat." After they hung up, Andre sat on his couch staring at nothing. This was a test, a real one. Could they maintain their boundaries without the safety net of other people around? Could they trust themselves to stay in the careful friendship they'd built instead of crossing lines they'd both agreed were there for good reasons? There was only one way to find out. Sunday evening, after Mike and Sarah had left for Florida, Andre drove over with Imani to check on things. Claire's car was in the driveway and he could see lights on in the upstairs bedroom, her studio. He almost turned around and left. Came back another time when she might be out. But Imani was already unbuckling herself, excited about the possibility of seeing the puppy. Claire answered the door in paint-splattered clothes, her hair piled on top of her head. "Hey," she said, smiling. "I was wondering when you'd stop by." "Just doing a quick check," Andre said, "making sure everything's good." "Come in. I just made iced tea if you want some." Imani ran off to find the puppy while Andre followed Claire to the kitchen. The house felt different without Mike and Sarah's energy filling it. Quieter, more intimate. Claire poured 2 glasses of tea and handed him one, and their fingers brushed in the exchange. Such a small touch, completely accidental, but Andre felt it in every nerve. "How's the work going for the gallery show?" he asked, needing to fill the silence. "Good. Terrifying. I keep second-guessing every piece. She leaned against the counter, and Andre noticed how comfortable she seemed in her own skin now. The nervous energy that had characterized her movements in July was gone, replaced by something steadier. But I'm doing it anyway. Good, you should be proud. I am, mostly. Claire took a sip of her tea. Actually, I wanted to ask you something. What? Would you come to the opening? Andre's first instinct was to say yes immediately, but he made himself pause. Really think about it. Being in public together at an event, celebrating her work, seeing her in her element, watching other people recognize her talent, it would blur the lines they'd worked so hard to maintain. Mike and Sarah will be there, Claire added quickly, reading his hesitation. I know they will, even if they have to drive all night to make it. And Imani's invited too. Obviously. I'm not asking you on a date or anything. I just want you there as a friend, as someone who helped make this possible. The way she said it, so carefully casual, told him how much the invitation actually meant. This was important to her. Her work, her healing, her reclamation of the parts of herself she'd lost, and she wanted him to witness it. Of course, Andre said. I'll be there. We both will. Claire's smile could have lit up the whole room. Thank you. That means thank you. Imani came running in with the puppy, full of questions about feeding schedules and whether puppies like tea. Claire laughed and got down on the floor with her, explaining that puppies needed water and special food, not iced tea. Andre watched them together, saw how naturally Claire engaged with his daughter, and felt something shift in his chest. This could be his life. Imani with someone who genuinely cared about her. Claire with someone who saw her worth. Andre with someone who understood his past and didn't need him to be anything other than who he was. They could be a family, but not yet, not yet. He and Imani left an hour later after checking that everything in the house was secure. As they drove home, Imani chattered about the puppy and Miss Claire's paintings and how she wanted to be an artist when she grew up. Andre listened, his mind only half on her words, the other half still back in that kitchen with Claire. The week passed slowly. Andre stopped by the house every evening, usually bringing Imani with him. Sometimes Claire was painting and barely noticed them. Other times she'd come down and they'd talk while Imani played with the puppy. The conversations were easy, comfortable, about work and art and parenting, and nothing particularly deep. But underneath every word was the constant awareness of what they weren't saying, what they were both choosing not to do. Thursday night, Imani fell asleep on Mike's couch while watching a movie. Andre went to wake her, but Claire stopped him with a gentle hand on his arm. Let her sleep a bit longer, she whispered. She looks so peaceful. They sat together on the opposite couch, the movie playing quietly in the background. Imani's soft breathing was the only other sound. It was domestic and intimate in a way that made Andre's heart ache. Can I tell you something? Claire said softly, her eyes on the screen, but her attention clearly elsewhere. Always. This past month, getting ready for the show, painting every day, I've been happy. Really, genuinely happy for the first time in years. She paused. But there are still moments when I catch myself falling into old patterns. Accommodating, making myself smaller, worrying more about what someone else needs than what I need. That's normal, Andre said. Patterns don't break overnight. I know. But I'm learning to catch myself, to stop and ask, is this what I actually want, or is this what I think I'm supposed to want? She turned to look at him. You taught me that, to question the difference. You would have figured it out on your own. Maybe. But you made it easier. Claire's expression was serious now. I need you to know that even if nothing ever happens between us, even if we stay exactly like this forever, friends and nothing more. You changed my life, Andre. You gave me back to myself. The words landed in his chest like physical blows, each one hitting home. He wanted to tell her she'd done the same for him, that knowing her was healing him in ways he hadn't fully acknowledged, that watching her transform had shown him what was possible beyond just surviving. But saying any of that felt too close to crossing lines. They'd both agreed were necessary. So instead he just said, I'm glad. They sat in comfortable silence until Imani woke up. Andre carried his sleepy daughter to the truck, Claire walking beside them. At the truck, she hugged Imani goodbye, then stepped back, her arms wrapping around herself in that familiar gesture. "See you tomorrow?" she asked. "Yeah," Andre said, "tomorrow." Friday afternoon brought Mike and Sarah home, exhausted but relieved that Sarah's mother was on the mend. Saturday morning was the gallery opening. Andre stood in front of his closet for a solid 10 minutes, feeling ridiculous. It was a gallery opening, not a wedding. Just a casual event where he'd support Claire's art, shake some hands, maybe drink some wine he wouldn't really taste because he'd be too busy making sure Imani didn't touch anything expensive. It shouldn't matter what he wore, but it mattered. He finally settled on dark jeans and a button-down shirt. Nice enough to show respect for the occasion, casual enough that he wouldn't look like he was trying too hard. Imani appeared in his doorway wearing her favorite purple dress, the one with the flowers that she insisted was fancy enough for anything. "Do I look pretty, Daddy?" "You look beautiful, sweetheart." Andre knelt down to fix the bow in her tight curls. "Remember, at the gallery we use our walking feet and gentle hands, okay?" "Okay, Miss Claire's paintings are very special, and we want to be respectful." "I know. I'll be good." Imani's face was serious with the weight of this responsibility. "Miss Claire is my friend. I want her to be happy about her art." Andre's chest tightened. His 7-year-old daughter had somehow intuited what he'd been too careful to acknowledge, that Claire mattered. To both of them. They arrived at the gallery 15 minutes before the official opening. The space was small but beautifully lit. Claire's paintings were arranged on white walls that made the colors pop. Claire stood near the back talking with the gallery owner, and when she saw them walk in, her whole face transformed. She was wearing a simple black dress that somehow made her look both elegant and approachable. Her hair down for once, falling in soft waves around her shoulders. She'd done something with makeup that made her eyes look huge and luminous. Andre felt his breath catch. "You came early," she said, walking over to them. "I'm so glad." Imani immediately launched into a detailed compliment about how pretty Miss Claire looked and how amazing the paintings were, even though she didn't fully understand them. Claire crouched down to Imani's level, listening with complete attention, and Andre watched the interaction with a lump in his throat. This was what he wanted, this easy affection between someone he cared about and his daughter. This natural connection that didn't feel forced or performative. "What do you think?" Claire asked him when Imani ran off to look at a painting of a sunrise. "Be honest." Andre took his time really looking at each piece. The collection told a story from darkness and pain to light and hope, from confinement to freedom. He recognized some of the paintings from her room, but seeing them here professionally displayed gave them new weight. These weren't just Claire's personal journey, they were universal. Anyone who'd ever felt broken or lost or less than could see themselves in these images. "I think you're going to sell every single one," Andre said finally. "These are extraordinary, Claire. You're just saying that because you're my friend." "I'm saying it because it's true." He turned to face her. "You took your pain and turned it into something beautiful. Something that'll help other people feel less alone. That's not just good art. That's important art." Claire's eyes shimmered with tears, but she was smiling. "Thank you. I needed to hear that." People started arriving. Friends, family, art enthusiasts, strangers who'd seen the announcement online. Mike and Sarah came in with their kids, and Mike immediately hugged his sister, lifting her off her feet. "Look at you all fancy and successful," he teased. "Mom and Dad are going to lose their minds when they see this." "They're coming," Claire said, then looked panicked. "I thought they were in Arizona until next month. They flew in this morning. Should be here any minute." Sure enough, 10 minutes later, an older couple walked through the door, and Claire flew into their arms. Andre watched the reunion from across the room, saw the pride on her parents' faces as they looked around at their daughter's work. This was what healing looked like. Not just surviving, but thriving. Not just getting through each day, but building something worth celebrating. The evening unfolded in a blur of conversation and champagne, of red dots appearing next to paintings as they sold, of Claire's growing disbelief that people actually wanted to buy her work. Imani charmed everyone she met, and Andre found himself in conversation with Claire's father, a retired mechanic who'd taught his daughter to see beauty in broken things. "She gets that from you, you know," Claire's mother said, joining them. The way she sees people, the way she looks past the surface to find what's really there. Andre wasn't sure if she was talking to him or her husband until she turned and looked at him directly. My daughter told me you helped her find her way back to painting. I just suggested she pick up a brush again, Andre said. She did all the hard work. That's not what she says. Claire's mother studied his face with an intensity that reminded him of her daughter. She says you showed her she was worth more than someone else's opinion. That's a rare gift, especially for someone who's been made to feel worthless. Andre didn't know what to say. He was saved from responding by Mike calling everyone to attention for a toast. They all raised their glasses while Mike gave an embarrassingly heartfelt speech about his little sister growing up to be amazing. And Claire laughed and cried and looked happier than Andre had ever seen her. Later, after the crowd had thinned and Imani was sitting quietly in a corner, looking at a picture book the gallery owner had given her, Claire found Andre standing in front of the painting he'd seen in her room, the figure reaching out of darkness toward light. "This one isn't for sale," Claire said softly. "Why not?" "Because it reminds me where I started. I need to keep it so I never forget what it felt like to be that lost." She stood beside him close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "And because it reminds me of the person who helped me find my way out." Andre's heart pounded. "Claire!" "I know," she said. "Boundaries, friendship, all the things we agreed on." She smiled, but there was sadness in it. "But you should know that painting is as much about you as it is about me. The reaching hand. That's you, Andre. You reached out when I was drowning." "You weren't drowning," he started. "Yes, I was." Claire's voice was steady. "I was drowning in self-doubt and shame and the belief that I was broken beyond repair. And you threw me a lifeline without even realizing it." She turned to face him fully. "So thank you for everything, for saying no when I needed you to say no, for being honest when I needed honesty more than comfort, for seeing me." Andre wanted to pull her into his arms. Wanted to tell her he hadn't stopped thinking about her since that night on the deck. Wanted to say to hell with boundaries and timing and all the rational reasons they'd agreed to wait. But they were in public, surrounded by her family and friends. And Imani was 10 feet away. So instead, he just said, "You're welcome." Mike appeared at his elbow, grinning. "Hey, I'm taking the kids for ice cream. You want me to take Imani too? Give you a break." Andre started to say no, but Imani heard the word ice cream and was already tugging on Mike's hand, begging to go. Andre watched his daughter leave with Mike and Sarah and their kids. And suddenly he and Claire were alone in the gallery, except for the owner, who was busy in the back office. The silence felt heavy, loaded with everything they weren't saying. "Walk with me?" Claire asked. "I need some air." They stepped outside into the September evening. The gallery was on Main Street, and people were out enjoying the last warm days of summer. They walked without any particular destination, just moving through the familiar downtown area where they'd both grown up. "I've been thinking," Claire said after a few minutes, "about what you said about becoming whole enough to choose each other for the right reasons instead of just filling empty spaces." Andre's pulse quickened. "Yeah, I think I'm getting there. Closer anyway." She glanced at him. "The show tonight, selling my work, having my parents there, it felt like proof that I'm real. That I exist outside of someone else's definition of me. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense. But I also realized something." They'd reached the park, and Claire led him to a bench overlooking the duck pond. "I realized that I can be whole on my own and still want you. That those two things don't have to be mutually exclusive." Andre sat down beside her, very aware of how close she was. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I'm not using you to fill an empty space anymore. The space isn't empty. I filled it myself, with painting and healing and learning who I am when I'm not accommodating everyone else." She took a breath. "But that doesn't make me want you any less. If anything, it makes me want you more because now I know the difference between wanting someone because I'm desperate and wanting someone because they genuinely add to my life." "Claire, we talked about this, the timing. The timing is never going to be perfect." She turned to face him on the bench. "I could wait another 6 months, another year, another 5 years, and there would still be reasons why it's not the right time. There will always be complications. You'll always have responsibilities with Imani. I'll always have my own healing to do. Mike will always be your best friend and my brother." "Exactly," Andre said. "So why risk it?" "Because some things are worth the risk." Her voice was quiet but certain. "Because I've spent the last 2 months learning to trust myself, learning to know what I want instead of what I think I should want. And I want you, Andre, not as a lifeline or a rebound or proof that I'm not broken. I want you because you're kind and steady and you see me in a way no one else ever has." Andre's hands gripped the edge of the bench. Every word she was saying resonated in his chest, echoed his own feelings that he'd been so carefully not examining. But wanting wasn't enough. Wanting had never been enough. "What about Mike?" he asked. "What about Imani? What about all the very real complications we agreed were good reasons to wait?" "We talked to Mike." Claire's voice was stronger now. "We're honest with him. He's my brother, but he's not my keeper. And he's your best friend, which means he wants you to be happy." "Would it be weird at first?" "Probably. But Mike's a grown-up. He can handle it." Claire reached over and took his hand. "And Imani? Imani already likes me. I already like her. Nothing has to change dramatically overnight. I'm not asking to move in or play house or become her mother. I'm just asking for a chance. For us to see if this thing between us is real, or if we've both just been lonely." Andre looked down at their joined hands. Her skin was warm, her fingers laced through his with a confidence that hadn't been there 2 months ago. She'd changed so much, grown so much, and he'd been part of that transformation. But she'd done the real work herself. "I'm scared," Andre admitted. "Scared of screwing this up. Scared of losing you and Mike and the stability I've built for Imani. Scared of being wrong about us." "I'm scared too," Claire said. "But I'm more scared of walking away from something real just because it's complicated." She squeezed his hand. "You told me once that healing isn't passive, that it's a choice you make over and over. Well, this is me choosing. I'm choosing to risk it. I'm choosing to be brave instead of safe. And I'm asking if you'll choose that too." Andre looked at her face in the fading light, seeing the certainty there, the quiet strength she'd built over these past weeks. She wasn't the desperate, broken woman who'd asked him to prove she was worth wanting. She was someone who knew her worth, who'd fought to reclaim it, and who was now making a conscious choice about what she wanted next. And what she wanted was him. The realization settled in his chest like something physical, heavy and warm and terrifying. She wanted him not as an escape or a band-aid or a convenient option. She wanted him because of who he was, complicated history and daughter and friendship with her brother. "I don't know how to do this," Andre said quietly. "How to be with someone again. How to let someone in without losing myself. How to protect Imani while also letting myself have something just for me." "Neither do I," Claire said. "We'd have to figure it out together." Claire shifted closer on the bench. "But I think we're both better at figuring things out than we give ourselves credit for. We both rebuilt our lives from nothing. We both learned to trust ourselves again. Why couldn't we learn to trust each other? Because other people are involved." Andre's voice tightened. "Because if we try this and it doesn't work, it doesn't just hurt us. It hurts Imani. It hurts Mike. It complicates everything. And if we don't try it and spend the rest of our lives wondering what if," Claire said gently, "that hurts too. Maybe not in the same way, but it still hurts." Andre knew she was right. He'd been living in what ifs for 3 years, wondering if he'd ever find someone who understood him, who didn't need him to be more or different or better. And here she was, offering exactly that. And he was too scared to reach out and take it. "I need to talk to Mike first," Andre said finally. "Before anything happens between us, I need to be honest with him about how I feel, about how you feel. He deserves that." Claire nodded. "Okay, when?" "Tomorrow. I'll ask him to meet me for coffee." Andre's stomach churned at the thought. "And then, depending on how that goes, we'll figure out the rest." She leaned her head on his shoulder, a gesture that was comfortable and intimate and felt like coming home. "Thank you for being willing to try." They sat like that for a long time, watching the ducks settle for the evening. The sky darkening overhead, Andre let himself imagine what it might be like, coming home to Claire after work, watching her paint while Imani did homework, building a life that was more than just him and his daughter surviving in their quiet house. The possibility was terrifying and beautiful in equal measure. His phone buzzed with a text from Mike. Got Imani sugared up on ice cream and she's asking for a sleepover with the girls. That cool with you? Andre showed Claire the message. What do you think? Writes, I think you should say yes, Claire said. Let Imani have fun. You deserve a night to yourself. Andre typed back his approval, and within minutes, Mike confirmed that Imani was settled in for the night. Andre and Claire walked back to the gallery to collect their things. The evening fully dark now, streetlights casting pools of gold on the sidewalk. Can I drive you home? Andre asked. I walked here, so yeah, that'd be nice. The drive to Mike's house was quiet, comfortable. Claire gave him directions he already knew by heart, and when they pulled into the driveway, she didn't immediately get out of the truck. Do you want to come in? She asked. Just for a bit. I'm too keyed up from the show to sleep anyway. Andre knew he should say no. Knew that going into an empty house with Claire after the conversation they just had was asking for trouble. But he also knew he didn't want the night to end yet. Just for a bit, he agreed. Inside, Claire kicked off her heels and went straight to the kitchen, pouring them both glasses of water. Andre stood in the living room looking at the photos on Mike's walls. Family pictures that included Claire at various ages growing up in front of his eyes. There was one of her at maybe 12 years old, holding a painting she'd done, grinning with pride. I'd forgotten about that, Claire said, coming to stand beside him. That was the first piece I ever sold. To my grandmother for $5. What did you paint? Her garden. All these flowers and colors that didn't exist in nature. Claire's voice went soft. She hung it in her kitchen until she died. Mom still has it somewhere. They moved to the couch, sitting at opposite ends, a careful distance between them. Claire tucked her feet under her and turned to face him. Tell me about your ex-wife, she said. Really, tell me. Not the sanitized version you gave me that first night. Andre leaned his head back against the couch. What do you want to know? What you loved about her, what went wrong, what you learned. He thought about deflecting, but Claire had been nothing but honest with him. She deserved the same. I loved that she was spontaneous when I was too serious, he said. That she pushed me to try new things, to be more than just the guy who worked and came home. She made me feel alive in a way I hadn't experienced before. And what went wrong? I couldn't keep up. The spontaneity I loved became exhausting. The pushing me to be more became criticism that I wasn't enough as I was. And somewhere along the way, she stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as an obstacle to the life she really wanted. He paused. The affair was almost a relief when I found out. It meant I could stop trying so hard to be someone I wasn't. Do you still love her? No, Andre said. I don't think I have for a long time. Maybe I never really did. Maybe I just loved the idea of being the kind of person who could make someone like her happy. Andre looked at Claire. That's what I learned, that you can't make someone happy who's determined to be unhappy with you. And that trying to change yourself into someone else's ideal just leaves you hollow. Claire nodded slowly. Jason used to tell me I thought too much, that I analyzed everything to death instead of just feeling. And I believed him. I thought there was something wrong with me for needing to understand things before I could relax into them. There's nothing wrong with that, Andre said. That's just how you're wired. I know that now, but it took me a long time to realize that his criticism said more about him than it did about me. She pulled a throw pillow into her lap, holding it like a shield. He needed me to be someone who didn't ask questions, who didn't expect emotional depth, who was just there to fulfill a role. And when I couldn't be that anymore, he made me feel like I was broken. You were never broken, Andre said. Neither were you. The words hung between them, simple and true. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of shared understanding making words unnecessary. I should go, Andre finally said, though he didn't move. Imani's taken care of, but it's late and you must be exhausted. Stay. The word was quiet but clear. Not like that. Just stay. Talk to me. I don't want to be alone tonight. Andre knew he should leave. Knew that staying would make tomorrow's conversation with Mike even harder. would blur lines they were supposed to be keeping clear. But Claire was looking at him with such open honesty, such simple need for companionship rather than anything more, that he couldn't bring himself to walk away. "Okay," Andre said. "I'll stay for a while." They talked for hours about everything and nothing, about their childhoods and their mistakes and their hopes for the future, about Amani's first day of school and Claire's plans for more paintings, and Andre's dream of one day opening his own HVAC business. The conversation flowed easily, naturally, the way it does between people who genuinely want to know each other. Somewhere around midnight, Claire fell asleep sitting up, her head tilted at an uncomfortable angle. Andre grabbed a blanket from the back of the couch and draped it over her, then settled into the opposite end, just watching her sleep. She looked peaceful, younger, free from the weight she'd been carrying for so long. He must have dozed off himself, because the next thing he knew, early morning light was streaming through the windows, and Claire was awake, looking at him with soft eyes. "You stayed," she said. "I stayed. Thank you." Andre sat up, his neck protesting the awkward position he'd slept in. "I should go. Need to shower and change before I meet Mike." Claire nodded, but there was apprehension in her expression. "Now, what are you going to tell him?" "The truth." Andre met her eyes. "That I have feelings for you. That you have feelings for me. That we want to see if there's something real here, but we won't do it without his blessing. And if he says no, then we respect that." Andre's voice was steady. "He's my best friend, Claire. I can't lose him." "I understand." She did understand. He could see it in her face, but that didn't make it hurt less. "When will I know?" she asked. "I'll call you after." He stood up and she walked him to the door. On the porch, he turned back. "Whatever happens, I want you to know these past 2 months. Getting to know you, watching you heal. It's been the best thing that's happened to me in years." "For me too," Claire said softly. Andre wanted to kiss her. Wanted it so badly his hands trembled with the effort of keeping them at his sides. But they'd agreed. Nothing until after he talked to Mike. Nothing until they knew if this was even possible. So instead, he just smiled and walked to his truck, feeling her eyes on him the whole way. The coffee shop was nearly empty at 8 on a Sunday morning. Just a few early risers reading newspapers and nursing their first cups of the day. Andre sat in the corner booth, the same one where he and Claire had talked that morning after the 4th of July, and waited for Mike to arrive. His stomach was in knots, his coffee untouched and going cold in front of him. He'd rehearsed this conversation a dozen times in the shower, in the truck on the way over, sitting here waiting, but none of his practiced words felt right. How did you tell your best friend that you'd fallen for his sister? How did you explain that it wasn't casual or sudden, that it had been building for months in quiet moments and careful boundaries? Mike walked in right on time, looking confused but not worried. Hey man, what's so urgent? It couldn't wait until after I got some sleep. Amani kept the girls up until midnight with ghost stories." Andre managed to smile. "Sorry about that. She gets that from me." "Everything okay?" Mike slid into the booth across from him, his expression shifting to concern. "Is Amani all right?" "Amani's fine. This isn't about her." Andre took a breath. "This is about Claire." Mike's eyebrows went up. "Claire? What about her? Did something happen at the show last night?" "No, the show was great. She sold almost everything." Andre wrapped his hands around his coffee cup, needing something to hold on to. "Mike, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear me out before you react." Now, Mike looked genuinely worried. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "You're kind of freaking me out here." "I have feelings for Claire." The words came out in a rush, too fast, not at all how he'd planned. "Romantic feelings, and she has feelings for me. We've been talking about whether to pursue something, but we both agreed we wouldn't do anything without talking to you first." Mike sat back against the booth, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched out, painful and heavy. Andre forced himself not to fill it, to let Mike process. "How long?" Mike finally asked. "The feelings? I don't know. Maybe longer than I realized, but we haven't done anything about them." Andre met his friend's eyes. "That night I finished your deck, the 4th of July. She and I had a conversation. She was in a bad place, dealing with everything from her breakup, and she asked me for something I couldn't give her, something that wouldn't have been right for either of us." "What did she ask for?" Mike's voice was carefully controlled. Andre chose his words carefully. She asked me to help her prove she wasn't broken, and I said no because she deserved better than that. Better than using me to feel whole again. Mike nodded slowly. Okay, and then what? Then we talked. Over the next couple months, we just talked about healing, about learning to trust ourselves again, about all the ways we'd both let other people define our worth. Andre's voice roughened. And somewhere in all that talking, I realized I cared about her, really cared about her, not just as your little sister or someone I felt sorry for, but as someone I genuinely wanted in my life. And she feels the same way. She says she does. She says she's not looking for me to fix her or save her or complete her. She says she's whole on her own now and she wants me anyway. Mike ran a hand over his face, processing. I don't know what to say here, man. This is a lot. I know. Andre leaned forward. And I know it's complicated. You're my best friend. She's your sister. If this goes wrong, it doesn't just affect me and Claire. It affects everyone. But I also know I've never felt this way about anyone. Claire sees me, really sees me, and she doesn't need me to be anything other than who I am. And I see her the same way. So what are you asking me? Mike asked. Permission? Blessing? I'm asking you to understand. Andre's throat felt tight. I'm asking you to know that I would never hurt her deliberately, that I care about her too much to be careless with her heart. And yeah, he admitted, I guess I am asking for your blessing because your friendship means everything to me. And if pursuing this would cost me that, I need to know now. Mike looked down at the table, his jaw working. When he looked up again, his eyes were serious. Can I ask you something? Anything. That night on the deck, when she asked you for something you couldn't give her, you could have said yes, right? You wanted to say yes. Andre didn't hesitate. Yeah, I wanted to say yes. But you didn't. Why? Because it would have hurt her, Andre said. Because she was vulnerable and looking for the wrong things in the wrong places. And taking advantage of that would have made me exactly the kind of man I never want to be. Andre held Mike's gaze. Because I respected her too much to be someone she used to feel better about herself. Even though saying no must have been hard. Hardest thing I've ever done. Mike nodded, seeming to come to some kind of decision. You know what Sarah said to me last night after we put the kids to bed and we were talking about Claire's show? What? She said she'd never seen Claire look at anyone the way she looks at you. Said it was the first time since the breakup that Claire seemed to have genuine hope about anything beyond her art. Mike's expression softened slightly. And you know what I realized? I've never seen you look at anyone that way either. You're different with Claire, more present, more yourself. Andre didn't know what to say to that. Look, Mike continued, this is weird for me. Claire's my baby sister. You're my best friend. The idea of you two together is going to take some getting used to. He paused. But I also want both of you to be happy. And if you make each other happy, if this is real and not just some rebound thing or convenience, then who am I to stand in the way? Hope bloomed in Andre's chest, tentative but real. So you're okay with it? I'm not going to say I'm thrilled about it, and I'm definitely going to have some choice words for Claire about keeping this from me. Mike's mouth quirked. But yeah, I'm okay with it, with conditions. Name them. 1, you don't rush into anything. You both take your time, figure out if this is real. 2, if it doesn't work out, you handle it like adults and don't make me choose sides. And 3, you remember that Imani comes first, always. If this relationship ever puts her stability at risk, you end it. No questions asked. Those were fair conditions. I can agree to all of them, Andre said. Good. Mike extended his hand across the table. Then you have my blessing. Don't make me regret it. Andre shook his hand, relief flooding through him so intensely he felt lightheaded. Thank you, seriously, thank you. Yeah, well, just remember, I know where you live if you hurt her. Mike tried to sound threatening, but couldn't quite pull it off. And I'm bigger than you. Only by an inch. An inch counts. Mike flagged down the waitress for actual coffee, his usual breakfast order. So, what now? You gonna tell her? Yeah, I told her I'd call after we talked. Are you gonna make her wait all day, or are you gonna put her out of her misery? Andre pulled out his phone and called Claire right there at the table. She answered on the first ring, her voice breathless. Well, Andre said, he said yes, with conditions, but yes. The sound she made was half laugh, half sob. Really? He's really okay with it? Really. He's sitting right here. If you want to talk to him, I'll put him on. Andre handed the phone to Mike, who took it with a resigned sigh. Hey, troublemaker. His voice was warm, affectionate. Yeah, we talked. Yeah, I'm okay with it. But Claire, seriously, you couldn't have told me you had feelings for my best friend before staging some big dramatic reveal. He listened, then laughed. I know. Just be careful, okay? Both of you. I love you both too much to watch you hurt each other. He handed the phone back to Andre, who stepped outside for privacy. The morning air was cool. Autumn finally settling in for real. Hey, Andre said softly. Hey yourself, Claire's voice was thick with emotion. So this is really happening. If you still want it to be, I want it to be. I want you. No hesitation, no doubt, just certainty. Andre's breath caught. I want you too. I have for a while now, even though I was too scared to admit it. Andre leaned against the brick wall of the coffee shop. So what do we do now? Now, you come over here, Claire said, and we figure it out together. I'm on my way. He went back inside long enough to pay the check and say goodbye to Mike, who pulled him into a quick hug and muttered something about not screwing this up. Then Andre drove to Mike's house with his heart pounding and his hands slightly shaking on the wheel. Claire was waiting on the porch, still in pajama pants and a t-shirt, her hair messy from sleep. She flew down the steps as soon as he parked, and he caught her in his arms, lifting her off her feet as she laughed and cried at the same time. We can really do this, she asked against his neck. We can really try? We can really try. Andre set her down but didn't let go. Slowly, carefully. With Imani and Mike and all our complicated histories, but yeah, we can try. Claire pulled back just enough to look at his face. I'm going to kiss you now. Is that okay? More than okay. She rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. And Andre felt something in his chest that had been locked tight for 3 years finally break open. The kiss was gentle, exploratory, nothing like the desperate passion of people trying to fill empty spaces. This was two whole people choosing each other, and it felt like the most honest thing Andre had ever experienced. When they broke apart, both of them were smiling. Come inside, Claire said. I'll make breakfast, and we can talk about what this actually looks like. Ground rules, boundaries, all of it. They spent the morning at the kitchen table mapping out what a relationship between them could be. They agreed to take things slow, to not introduce Claire to Imani as anything more than a friend until they were certain this was lasting. They agreed to be honest with each other about fears and doubts instead of letting them fester. They agreed that if things got hard, they'd talk it through instead of running. And they agreed that they were both going into this as complete people, not broken pieces looking to be fixed. Over the next few months, they built something real. Andre would stop by after work sometimes, and he and Claire would sit in her studio while she painted, and he sketched out plans for the business he was thinking about starting. They went on actual dates, movies and dinners and long walks through the park. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, learning each other's rhythms and quirks and histories. Imani met Claire properly as someone her dad was dating on a Saturday in November. They went to the zoo, and Andre watched nervously as his daughter and the woman he was falling in love with interacted. But he needn't have worried. Claire was natural with Imani, never trying too hard or making promises she couldn't keep. She just treated his daughter like a person worth knowing, and Imani responded to that authenticity. So, I like Miss Claire, Imani announced on the drive home. She's not trying to be my mom, she's just nice. Yeah, Andre agreed. She is just nice. By December, Claire had moved most of her painting supplies into her own apartment downtown, a small space with good light that she'd rented with money from her gallery sales. She was building a life that was entirely her own, not dependent on her parents or her brother or anyone else. Andre visited her there often, helping her hang shelves and install better lighting, and they'd order takeout and eat sitting on the floor because she hadn't bought furniture yet. I like this, Claire said one night, leaning against him. Building something from nothing, making choices because I want to, not because I should. Me too, Andre said, and he meant it. For the first time since his divorce, he felt like he was building towards something instead of just maintaining what he had. Christmas came and they spent it with both their families. Mike made a few jokes about Andre officially being family now, and Sarah winked at Claire when she thought no one was looking. Imani gave Claire a painting she'd made herself, a family portrait that included all of them, even Mike and Sarah and their kids and the puppy. "Is this how you see us?" Claire asked, her voice thick with emotion. "Yeah," Imani said simply, "because we're all family now." January brought Claire's second gallery show, this one even more successful than the first. The paintings were different now, brighter, more hopeful, full of movement and joy instead of pain and darkness. One piece in particular caught everyone's attention. A man and a woman building something together. Their hands both on the same tools, their faces turned toward each other with complete trust. "That's us," Andre said quietly, standing in front of it. "Yeah," Claire agreed. "That's us building something real." The painting sold before the end of the night, but Claire didn't mind. She'd already captured what mattered. The feeling of creating something with someone instead of for someone. The difference between being needed and being wanted. The beauty of two whole people choosing each other every single day. Spring arrived with warm breezes and longer days. Andre finally took the leap and opened his own HVAC business with Mike as a silent partner and Claire as his biggest cheerleader. The first few months were terrifying and exhausting, but every night Claire would talk him through his doubts, remind him of his competence, celebrate his small victories. "You're doing it," she'd say. "You're building the life you actually want instead of just accepting what you have." "We're doing it," Andre would correct, "both of us." One Saturday in May, almost a year after that night on the deck, Andre took Imani and Claire to the park for a picnic. They spread out a blanket under the same trees where he and Claire had sat on that bench and talked about taking risks. Imani ran off to play on the swings, and Andre and Claire lay on their backs, watching clouds drift by. "Do you remember what you asked me that night?" Claire said softly. "On the deck." "Of course." "Do you remember what you said?" "I said you deserved someone who wanted to know your heart before they touched your body." Claire rolled onto her side to look at him. "You were right. I needed to hear that. I needed someone to see me as more than just a body, more than just broken pieces that needed fixing." Andre reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You were never broken." "Neither were you." She leaned in and kissed him slow and sweet. "Thank you for waiting, for making me wait, for knowing what I needed better than I did. Thank you for being patient while I figured out I was allowed to want something just for me." They lay there in the sunshine watching Imani play, talking about the future they were building together. Claire had been invited to show her work in a gallery in Cleveland. Andre's business was growing faster than he'd anticipated. Imani was doing well in school and had started asking careful questions about whether Claire might stay forever. "What would you say," Andre asked, "if I asked you to move in with us? Not right away, but eventually." Claire was quiet for a moment. "I'd say I want to, but I'd also want to make sure we're doing it for the right reasons. Not because it's convenient or expected, but because it's what we both genuinely want." "That's what I love about you," Andre smiled. "You always make me think about my motivations." "Oh, you love me?" The question was soft, vulnerable. Andre sat up, pulling her with him. "Yeah, I love you. Have for a while now, but I wanted to be sure. I wanted to know it was real and not just..." He swallowed. "Not just loneliness or convenience or filling empty spaces." "Exactly." Claire's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "I love you too. And I love Imani, and I love what we're building together. So is that a yes to eventually moving in? That's a let's keep talking about it and making sure we're both ready." She kissed him again. "But yeah, eventually I think it's a yes." They picked up Imani from the swings and walked home together, the three of them. And Andre felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not just contentment or stability, but genuine happiness. The kind that came from choosing the hard thing over the easy thing. From doing the work instead of looking for shortcuts. From building something real with someone who saw you completely and chose you anyway. That summer, on the anniversary of the night on the deck, Andre and Claire sat outside under string lights that Mike had helped him hang in his backyard. Imani was asleep inside, worn out from a day at the pool. The night air was warm, and fireworks from a nearby neighborhood popped and crackled in the distance. Do you ever regret it? Claire asked. That you said no that night. Andre thought about it honestly. No, if I'd said yes, if we'd started this with me taking what you were offering instead of waiting until you knew what you actually wanted, we wouldn't be here right now. We'd have burned out fast, hurt each other, probably destroyed any chance of building something real. You're right. Claire leaned her head on his shoulder. But I'm glad we got here eventually. Me too. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the distant fireworks paint the sky in colors that reminded Andre of Claire's paintings, vibrant and alive and full of hope. A year ago, he'd stood on Mike's deck and made the hardest choice of his life, turning away from what he wanted because it wasn't what either of them needed. And that choice had led them here, to this moment, to a love that was built on honesty and healing and the courage to wait for the right thing instead of settling for the available thing. Andre, Claire said softly. Yeah. Thank you for seeing me, really seeing me, not as broken pieces or potential or someone to fix, but as a whole person who was just temporarily lost. Thank you for letting me, Andre said, and for seeing me the same way. Imani's voice called from inside, asking for water. Andre started to get up, but Claire stopped him with a hand on his arm. I'll get it. You stay here? He watched her go into the house, moving through his space with the easy familiarity of someone who belonged there. Through the window, he could see her talking to Imani, getting her water, tucking her back into bed with gentle hands. His daughter, his home, his life, and Claire fitting into all of it, not because she was trying to fill empty spaces, but because she'd become part of the foundation itself. She came back outside and settled next to him, and they stayed there late into the night, talking and laughing and planning their future together. Above them, the stars came out one by one, and the fireworks finally faded, and the world grew quiet, except for their voices and their dreams and the sound of two whole people choosing each other over and over again with every word and every moment and every shared breath. It was enough, more than enough.